Good evening, viewers, and welcome to the Personal Injury Law Show. This is a show that tries to educate you and at times shock you in the world of personal injuries. My name's Tony Carbone, lawyer of 25 years experience, and with me tonight I've got the Don of Transport Accidents, Don Maffia. Good evening, Don.
Good evening, Tony. Good evening, viewers.
Also an up-and-coming star, Robert Paoletti. Good evening, Robert.
How's it going, Tony? Good to be on the show.
Now, what's in the news, Tony?
Well, what's in the news will shock you. Within 24 hours, guys, we had 6 deaths. This was just recent.
Yes.
It just shows how careless and non-caring our society is becoming. It's amazing how many things are happening on the road these days, and most of these accidents that are horrific like this are due to carelessness. What's your take on it, Rob?
Well, it just seems like people aren't taking enough care on the roads, as you say. I mean, really, when you see the pictures in these accidents, the severity of it all, I mean, people don't realise that a small error can cause massive injuries, can cost you your life.
Well, the thing about these, Don, is that the ones that are being careless are generally the ones that are killing other people.
Well, that's right, Tony. And the thing is, like you said, it was over a 24-hour period, and it was 4 accidents, I believe, and as a result, 5 or 6 deaths. So that's just remarkable.
And because of the magnitude of some of these accidents, there was a semi-trailer involved in one. It was very fortunate that there wasn't multiple deaths.
Yes, that's correct, Tony. And look, we just have to take care on the roads.
Now, in addition to carelessness, there's idiocy on the road. There's a picture here of a lady with a helmet and her baby on the back.
Yes, I saw that picture, Tony, and that's just, again, unbelievable. She's driving along. She's wearing a helmet, but the baby's not wearing a helmet.
And curiously, Rob, what's happened is this. It's been plastered all over the radio. They can't identify this lady, so it comes back to what we've been saying in the past. These bikes probably need some sort of identification plates.
That's right. It's one of these circumstances where it could come in useful.
They've been trying to identify, but they can't. They just cannot work out who this lady is, and no one's come forward at this stage. No. But anyway, let's move on with the show. And tonight, viewers, we're going to be talking about the standard of care on the road. And in the first case, we're talking about a matter of Imbrie and McNally. Do you want to tell us a bit about the facts of this case?
I'll give the facts of that, Tony. This is one of these cases that concerns a learner driver. Look, basically, we had a learner driver who was in the car with a supervisor. There were also a couple of other people in the car. Now, the supervisor wasn't a qualified instructor. It was just another person in the car. So they're going along an unpaved road in the country, and they see that there's a bit of a tyre on the road. Now, the supervisor doesn't say anything, and the learner driver, being inexperienced, just takes matters into his own hands, keeps travelling quickly, does a sort of sharp manoeuvre to the right to get around this tyre, pulls quickly to the left, loses control of the car, and it turns over. It causes quite significant injuries to the supervisor.
What happened in this case, Don?
Well, actually, the injuries were he became quadriplegic, Tony. So it's quite the severity of the injuries were quite, again, to the significant extent. But at first instance, so the judge at trial held that the driver was liable and that the supervisor, the plaintiff, was actually contributed to negligence, was guilty or had contributed to the accident
at proportion?
30% for failing to properly supervise the driver.
What happened after that? It was appealed, wasn't it, Rob?
That's right. It went to appeal in this matter. And look, the next court basically upheld what the trial judge had said in this matter and said that this...
so 3 judges in the Court of Appeal upheld the decision?
That's right. Yeah. And ultimately how the difference in opinion was contributory negligence. Ultimately how the Court of Appeal that the plaintiff was 2/3 liable as compared to
pretty
the
high
judgment. That's right. And the question was, what was the standard of care? There's been, since about 1986, there was a case where the High Court held...
Case of Cook?
Cook and Cook, similar circumstances, learner-driver situation, and the standard of care was held to be of an inexperienced driver. So in other words, the driver owed a standard of care according to what an inexperienced or unqualified driver would do.
They were trying to differentiate between the level or the duty of care at different levels. So if you're experienced, it's the standard of care of an experienced driver.
That's correct.
If you're inexperienced, it's the standard of care of an inexperienced driver.
That's correct.
It's creating too many divisions, I would have thought.
And that's right, and that's what ultimately the High Court held as too many divisions. But like the standard of care that the learner driver had to, let's say, a pedestrian was that of standard driver. But of course, from that case of Cook and Cook, it was held that, well, the standard of care owed to the supervising driver was of a lesser standard.
In Cook and Cook, what happened there, Rob? Did the plaintiff win or lose?
There were similar circumstances, and look, ultimately what they were trying to do was differentiate, as Don was saying, between different drivers. What the court here is saying, which is interesting, is that inexperience is one of many factors that has to be taken into account when you're assessing the standard of care.
But it's not the be-all, end-all.
That's right. There's other factors such as age, vision, factors such as that do affect it.
And just plain carelessness.
That's right.
And ultimately, the High Court in this case, Tony, just turned around and actually standardised the standard of care. So the standard of care applicable to a learner driver to a supervising driver is just that of a normal, reasonable driver. And the High Court considered all those cases and said, look, that Cook is not in line with what's going on in terms of compulsory third-party insurance. There was a dissenting judge who put a lot of weight on the fact that we now have compulsory third-party insurance.
It's too complicated, but as far as we're concerned, the law's pretty clear-cut these days. The standard of care of an inexperienced driver is the standard of care of the reasonable driver. That's in short. Now, look, this was a very horrific case because the plaintiff was awarded over $9.5 million in damages. So the injuries were quite significant, Rob.
That's correct.
But the High Court did say that they upheld the original trial judge's verdict of contributory negligence and kept it at 30%. So it didn't agree with the Court of Appeal.
I think 50% was too much to start with.
I think so.
Can I just say, assuming the person next to the learner driver was an experienced driver who took driving lessons, would it be any different?
It is. The High Court did differentiate between a supervisor and an instructor. There was a consideration of those words. Ultimately, there will be a different, I believe anyway, in terms of contributing.
How much do you reckon it would have been, Don, if it was an experienced?
The instructor would be quite high because
50%?
If it's instructor, you leave probably a little bit around that, or if not more, because the instructor does have the pedals on most occasions and is a professional.
Okay.
They're experienced, so I would have thought it would be around probably a little bit higher, Tony.
Yeah. What do you think, Rob? 50%?
Yeah, exactly. Well, perhaps even more. It really depends on the circumstances.
And so the outcome of all this is that obviously a supervising driver now is afforded the protection that there's a standard of care that's a reasonable driver. And in these days...
Which is important.
And in these days, we're required to do learn to drive at 120 hours before you can get your licence.
I'd give him 200 hours, but anyway, like I said, there's a lot of carelessness on the roads. Can we quickly go into the facts of Thornton and Sweeney, Rob? Can you tell us about that?
Yep, of course. This is another matter that concerns a learner driver and an instructor, but in this case, it's a bit of a flip in the facts. Now, again, we have a learner driver that's at the wheel and a supervisor, not anyone with any qualifications. So they're going, again, on a pretty treacherous road. The speed limit is roughly about 100 kilometres an hour. They're approaching a bend which is quite deceptively difficult to negotiate. This learner driver goes into the bend at approximately 70 kilometres per hour.
Oh, there's a lot of debate about the speed.
That's right. There was a lot of debate in the case. But in this case, basically, they lost control of the vehicle and it overturned again.
Horrific injuries.
Yep.
We've got to go to a sponsors break, so we'll come back to that just after the break. Viewers, please stay tuned. We'll go to a sponsors break and we'll be back very shortly. Thank you.